Hello, and welcome to a special bonus episode of the Mama Podcast. In this episode, our CEO Heidi Eldridge is joined by Joanna from NCT to discuss their brand new report, From Expectation to Reality, which captures the experiences of 2,000 new and expectant parents across the UK. Together, they explore what parents are really feeling during pregnancy, birth, and early parenthood. The gap between expectation and experience, the impact of staffing pressures, the importance of informed consent and genuine choice, and the urgent need to listen, especially to those whose voices are often overlooked. This conversation sits within a national context of maternity investigations and reform. It's a reminder that behind every policy decision are real families navigating complex, emotional, and sometimes overwhelming journeys into parenthood. As always, our aim is to amplify evidence, support safe care, and encourage collaboration across the maternity space. Let's get started.
Episode of the Mama Podcast. I'm Heidi Eldridge, the founder and CEO of Mama Academy, and here I am with Joanna from NCT. Thank you so much for joining us today, Joanna. Please do introduce yourself to our listeners and tell us all about you.
Hi, Heidi. Well, thank you so much for having me on the podcast today. Delighted to be here. I'm Jo. I'm head of communications and campaigns at NCT, the National Childbirth Trust. I have been with the NCT for about 3 years now, and joined following the birth of my first baby, which was in 2020. I had the delightful experience of having a pandemic baby. And having worked in the charity sector for about 15 years before that, it was the experience of having a baby and sort of seeing maternity services firsthand that made me think, something's not quite right here. I'd quite like to get involved in an organisation that is really working to try to change it and make things better for parents. So that's what led me to NCT. I was also a member of my local MVP at that point. And so, yeah, just kind of working at the national and very local level to try and make things better. I live in Suffolk. I'm a little country bumpkin, but I'm sort of in and out of London quite a lot because I also represent NCT sort of in the sort of policy spaces, so often at government and attending local APPGs, sorry. So yeah, that's a bit about me.
Very busy then, very busy. It sounds like you've got lots of different hats.
Quite a few different hats.
I know the feeling. So tell us a little bit more about NCT and the work that they're doing at the moment.
I think NCT is a really fascinating and significant organisation. It's been around for 70 years. It's the 70th year in 2026. And it has a really rich heritage and history in shaping maternity services and supporting parents through pregnancy in the early years. I think a lot of people hear NCT and they know about it for its antenatal courses. And of course, that is a very important part of the work that the charity does, but it also does a huge amount more than that. It's a volunteer-led movement at its heart and a movement that's led by parents. So there's thousands of community groups across the country that are supporting people postnatally. And those are often like really, really responsive to what parents need locally. So it might be infant feeding support. It might be Parents in Mind, which is our peer supporters for parents who are experiencing mental health challenges. There's just a lot going on that people don't know about, I think, within the organisation. And the other side of it is that we also run a lot of free to access services. So again, like infant feeding support, antenatal education through trusts. There's a lot going on.
That is an awful lot. Now, you're here with us today to talk to us about this brand new report that NCT have literally just issued. So Please do tell us all about it, why you've conducted this report and how it's been conducted.
I think the wider context is really important, and the maternity system in the UK is on the cusp, hopefully, of significant change, and it's never been more important, I think, to listen to women and to new parents and to hear the diversity of experiences that are happening in pregnancy, birth, and the early parenthood space. I think in particular with the national maternity investigation that's underway in England, and the investigation or the assessment that's happening in Wales, and of course increasing pressure and commitments from the Scottish government to do something similar up there, I think we do have really a once in a generation opportunity to improve maternity, neonatal and postnatal care. And I think that this has to be a moment which is shaped by the experiences of pregnant women and people and new parents, to make sure that care is really safe, equitable, personalised and responsive every day. And so we wanted to take this moment to listen deeply. I mean, as an organisation, we're supporting hundreds of thousand parents a year, and we're listening to and supporting parents every day. So we are speaking to and listening to them constantly. But we wanted to take this opportunity to really capture a snapshot of what people's experiences are right now. So we have brought together the experiences of 2,000 new and expectant parents across the UK, and that includes 500 women and people who are currently pregnant at the time of the survey, because we wanted to hear directly for them. And I think what we heard was a really clear and challenging picture of what it's like to navigate pregnancy, birth and early parenthood, and really what urgently needs to change. Yeah.
That sounds fantastic. And what have you called the report?
So the report is called From Expectation to Reality, and parents' experiences of new life through pregnancy, birth and early parenthood. And I think it's that title, Expectation to Reality, that really speaks to what people are have told us about, which is that what they think is going to happen to them in pregnancy and birth is often not the case, and their expectations at the beginning of their pregnancy are often mismatched with what they go on to experience in NHS maternity services.
Absolutely. So what were the key findings then? What were the experiences of the women and birthing people that you surveyed?
I think it's important to say, I think, at the top, that not every experience is, of course, the same. And the way that somebody reports an experience is incredibly nuanced. Like, you can have a difficult time, but then also experience joy and pleasure in the experience of becoming a parent. But I think what we heard very clearly is that people are being told that having a baby should be the happiest time of their lives, but there's a real gap between the society's expectation of what it is like to become a parent and then the experience of what they actually have. And parents find it to be much more nuanced, emotional, and at times overwhelming. So I think one of the things that really struck us was that nearly half of parents were telling us that they felt more worried than excited when they were pregnant or having or expecting their baby. And I think that we've got to really acknowledge that and support them, because it is such a major life transition. And we also heard that sort of alongside those worries, people are worried about their mental health. They're worried about not being a good parent, whether or not they're going to have the skills to look after their baby. And they're also worrying about the emotional sides of parenting, including their relationship with their partner if they have one. So I think it's just that those early stages of pregnancy, people are just feeling the weight of it, and they're really anxious and they're worried.
So
And they're
that
feeling
was, sorry, that was the sort of general consensus, that in early pregnancy, parents were more worried about when the baby was here and how they were going to cope with when the baby was here, rather than the actual pregnancy itself.
Yeah, exactly that. They're worrying about sort of how they're feeling through the experience. Yeah. And I think the other thing is that they're also worrying about the care that they're going to receive when they're going into NHS maternity systems. So we heard that over half, so women and pregnant people who are pregnant at the time of survey, over half of them were worried about whether or not the place that they were going to be having their baby would be safe, and then also how they were going to be treated by medical professionals. And I think that sort of really speaks to the fact that many parents are not feeling confident using maternity services. And that obviously speaks to the fact that these are issues that are, really prevalent in the media at the moment. And I think that is playing into the way that people are feeling when they're, first encountering their midwives or, their medical support teams.
Absolutely. And what were the general sort of experiences of women actually giving birth during their labour? Because we've talked about sort of during pregnancy. What about during labour and the actual birthing experience?
I mean, so again, it's a real there are some common themes that emerged. I think what was interesting perhaps is that the majority of people did report having a positive birth experience. So we had 1 in 7 people said that their birth was experienced. That their birth was positive. But then what is interesting within that is that they also go on to say that they felt unsafe, unsupported, and uninformed through that. So again, I think that maybe that speaks to a bit of what I was saying about that expectation versus reality, or how people would describe a birth as positive. But then when you go into their actual experience, there's much more nuance within it.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, 1 in 7 is saying that they had a positive experience. But then just to give you kind of a flavour of how that plays out in the type of care that they're receiving, 1 in 5 said that they didn't get all of the information that they needed from medical professionals, and that they weren't supported to make informed decisions about their birth. Now, we know that those two things are so important to positive birth experiences and upholding birth rights, and yet that's not happening consistently.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got lots of information about that on our website, and lots of information for midwives as well about how to explain things in the right context, and how to ask a parent for consent, how to give informed consent. It's so important to be really, really empowered, isn't it? So, and I'm just wondering about, if parents were saying they were really worried about the care that they received, what happens sort of postnatally? Do postnatally they then say that they were right to be worried, or did they then say actually it was a better experience than what they thought it would be? I'd be interested to know that.
But I think that's sort of what I mean, in that the way that people describe their experience as being positive, but then when you actually dig into that experience more, you see that there are some pretty poor experiences taking place. And so I think maybe for us, there's a takeaway of like, how do we dig into what people, how people define an experience as positive and what they mean by that as well. But certainly postnatally, I think what we saw, or what we see in the CQC reports, for example, is that if somebody has experienced like continuity, for example, around their care, that they are much more likely to report a positive experience. And that certainly plays out in our research as well. If people feel like they knew their midwife, they're more likely to have felt like they were informed and supported in that postnatal period.
Absolutely, yeah. Continuity of care is so important, and we know that it's associated with better outcomes at the end of the day. So that is so important. Being able to feel safe and confident in talking to your maternity team is really important. So that's really interesting. So out of all these findings, what were like your recommendations out from the report itself?
Well, there's a lot more that the report goes into. And I was just going to say that I think a couple of other things just to pick out in the birth space, where I was explaining that sort of distinction of people saying an experience is positive, but then what we actually sort of uncovered is that there was quite a lot of evidence of people experiencing pressure and coercion into making decisions that they didn't want to make, and of course then also and also not knowing that they are entitled to make decisions that they, and that I think that's supporting that process of informed decision making and building parents' understanding of their own rights within birth. That seems to be something that is really not happening consistently for people's experiences. So from a recommendations point of view, that's something that we're really keen to see, is much greater promotion of birth rights and informed consent practices within individual trusts. And I think that there are some really simple things that trusts could do, such as just, having some very simple posters around about what women's birth rights are, so that, we know that when midwives are incredibly stretched for time, and we understand the pressure that the system is under, that, at every possible moment, women and parents are having those messages reaffirmed and upfront and centre for them, so that when they're going into their meetings, they can also feel empowered to ask some of those questions themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so important to have as much information as possible at your fingertips. And I guess you're right, it's always a challenge for the healthcare professionals to spend that time with parents as well. And you never really know, you know, what's going to happen, but to sort of look at all the options, your rights, how to give informed choice, that's so important. So obviously a lot more work needs to be done around that, because it's all very well in hindsight, isn't it, when you've had to make a decision in a really pressured environment, because you've got to make that decision there and then because you're in the middle of labor. There's always afterwards in hindsight, oh, what if I had done that, or what if I had done this? And yeah, that must feel incredibly difficult for the parents afterwards to be going through that and have some regrets, if you like.
Yeah, I absolutely. I think that's very much what comes through in the research, and what we hear from parents as well, is that they're just not feeling like they're supported in that decision-making process, and often feeling very overwhelmed by the information that they're given. You know, there's a sense of like, sometimes there are like very urgent and time pressured decisions that need to be made, but I think there should always be time and space for parents to be able to consult and ask the questions that they want to ask, so that they can make the decision that feels right for them and their baby at that point.
Yeah, definitely. And what about feeling listened to? Because I hear this theme time and time again, where, you know, parents have reported something, but they've been sent home, or they think they've started labour, but again they've been sent home. And was that a theme? Did they feel like they weren't being listened to when they were trying to raise any concerns that they may have had?
Yeah, exactly as you say, like, it's a significant number of people were reporting feeling dismissed or disrespected. That came through in particular in the antenatal space, and I think sort of just in the lead up to labour progressing and starting. And I think that does really point to a serious gap in relationship-based care, and the fact that women are not feeling like they're listened to. I think it was 1 in 5 of the parents of the women and parents that we surveyed didn't feel listened to or respected, or that their concerns were taken seriously. And again, that does mirror what we're hearing in the CQC reports, for example, but it's clear that it's a systemic issue. And I think the other thing that came through is that in our case study work and in the testimonials that we hear from parents through our courses, is that often it's those first time parents who feel particularly dismissed. You know, it's an entirely new experience for them. They don't have anything previously to kind of benchmark again, or like they don't understand the system. And I think that is something that comes through in the report, is that it's those first time parents often feeling in particular not listened to or dismissed. And then there's also this kind of, it plays across inequities as well. Again, like the report finds that, and this mirrors what we hear through the Embrace report and many other, the work of 5 Times More, for example. But there are racial discriminations taking place within the NHS, and they can't be ignored. It's clear that that is something that's happening, and and people feeling like they're being discriminated against because of the color of their skin, or they're not listened to, or they're being responded to in a particular way, and that is completely unacceptable and has to stop. And again, that's something that comes through very clearly in people's responses to the survey.
And I imagine it's the same case with language barriers as well, when interpreters can't be brought in quick enough, or the quality of the translation isn't there. And so again, that makes it harder for decision making and to give informed consent if they don't fully understand the options that, you know, are being laid out to them. That must be incredibly difficult.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the kind of main, one of the recommendations in the report, is that kind of consistent approach to interpretation services. And there's not a national framework, and we think that that's really needed. I think in the short term, there are things that could also be done. So one of them are, we run a service in Newham which supports migrant and refugee women, and we've worked really closely with the team on the ground to develop some very quick translated triaging cards that that we hand out to those mothers who speak, the kind of languages where it's very difficult to find an interpreter at short notice. And those are just very simple kind of cards to help at the triaging stage of saying, like, I have pain here, I've got reduced movements. So just simple things like that, through our services, we're just trying to help bridge those language barriers and make sure that when triaging is really urgent and needed, that they get that support quickly. There's all sorts of limitations with AI and technology and translation services, and I think a lot of scrutiny is needed in that space. But in the short term, this is just something that one of our projects is doing, and it is seemingly making a real impact to those women.
That's amazing. That sounds absolutely fantastic. How invaluable is that?
Yeah.
That's wonderful. And I expect it won't just be used in Newham very soon. I'm sure it will be used in lots of other parts.
They're being rolled out. I think they're being rolled out across London trusts. And we're really keen for them to be elsewhere as well, and downloadable from the website. So that's sort of the next step for us.
Yeah, sounds absolutely fantastic. What wonderful work that you guys are doing. That's brilliant. So, what are the other key recommendations that came out of the report? I'm sure there's no, quick fix. There's no magic wand, especially when it is mainly down to systemic problems. But I'd love to know, all of the recommendations, but also some of the simple ones that are quick fixes that trusts may be able to implement fairly quickly.
I think the first thing that we've called for, and it's probably no surprises, and hopefully would be welcome to the midwives listening, is that we think that we've absolutely got to train, invest, and recruit to ensure safe staffing levels. I think, like so many maternity and neonatal teams are providing care with such compassion and professionalism, even under immense pressure. But without those safe staffing levels, I think we know that teams are burning out. We know that midwives are leaving. There's compassion fatigue happening. And I think that's played out in the report that we found as well. And I think also the staffing levels, it means that services are being suspended, which is putting safety, quality care at further risk, and infringing people's birth rights to be able to make informed decisions about how and where they give birth. So I think absolutely investing and supporting the midwifery workforce is vital, but we think that workforce planning has got to be rooted in the needs of pregnant women and people, and that means ensuring that they've got enough time to build meaningful relationships, offer that personalized care and continuity, and provide information, as we've said, because this is something that it is a real issue. People not feeling like they're getting the information that they need, that they're not being listened to, they don't have time to ask questions and have their questions answered in a way that they can understand, or to revisit those decisions and questions at a later point as things change. So safe staffing is the sort of foundation of everything, I think. We've also think that within that, something that Embrace has found is that with the people who are falling through and experiencing some of the worst outcomes in our maternity services are people who face a constellation of biases. So be that housing insecurity, previous trauma, mental health challenges, low income or no income. And so I think that we also need to look at midwifery services and how they can help those most vulnerable women and parents to access the wider services, such as safeguarding domestic abuse and perinatal mental health services. And it's that sort of that thinking about the service and how it bridges in and refers is so vital. So I think for us, it's thinking about the whole system approach, particularly for those who are the most vulnerable of poor outcomes. And that feels critical. So I think you would probably agree. And there's obviously like campaigns at the moment around safe staffing and what those working conditions look like as well, and that's something that we would really support. I think midwives have got to be working in safe and supported conditions, because only then will they be able to deliver the best quality care that they can and keep parents and babies safe.
Absolutely, yeah, it's so important, or just as important, to look after the midwives as well as the parents, because otherwise they're just going to be completely burnt out. And that's when it leads to unsafe care.
Yeah, that's it. And I think we also support the NHS plan to move more care out of hospitals and into the communities, with more midwives based in the communities, working closely with health visitors and GPs, because in the sort of postnatal space in particular, I think like there's definite need for that. Parents are really not getting the support that they need postnatally. Many people are describing this massive drop off to us, like they've come home from hospital and they really feel very isolated and alone and vulnerable with their baby. So I think that is also really, really important to invest in.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess parents can feel quite forgotten about once they've left the building.
Yeah.
That's when they feel sort of a bit neglected. And again, especially for the more vulnerable families, they're the ones that would need the extra support, which is so important. But we can only do that if there's efficient staffing levels.
Yeah, exactly. And I think within the staffing levels, one of the other kind of big recommendations of the report is ensuring genuine choice in place of birth and care options. And one of the things that we heard through the report is that people really didn't feel like they had clear options available to them. So it might be that their home birth service had been suspended, or their local midwifery unit had closed, or they weren't aware that they were able to ask for an elective cesarean. So I think we've really got to centre on choice and make sure that we are, that all maternity systems are able to provide that full range of birth services, which are consistently open and available, because there's just so much uncertainty for people. And that is a really difficult thing for women to have to make last minute changes and adjustments to their birth preferences and plans, because the system isn't able to support it. So genuine choice is just a fundamental, and it cannot be eroded any further.
Absolutely. Consistency across the country, so there's no postcode lottery, would just be fabulous. It would be amazing, and then every parent gets the same care no matter where they are. That would just be wonderful. So,
and in the short term, it's like, what, we don't even know where is the reporting happening of like where services are being suspended. Like there isn't a way of being able to tell this picture of what is happening at a national level. So I think it's a real blind spot. We don't know exactly, in individual trusts and individual locations, what's open and when. It's because things are changing on a weekly basis, so it's very difficult for people to navigate.
That's very true. Yes, they can't access current real-time information, so they don't know where to go. And did that come out in the report, just thinking about access to pregnancy care? Because as a charity ourselves, we get so many inquiries and so many calls about, I'm pregnant, I don't know what to do, I don't know how to register, for instance. Or we get calls where they've got problems and they don't know what number to call to speak to a midwife. They don't know how to access maternity services in the first place. So I wonder if that came out in the report at all.
We didn't ask a question specifically about access, but similarly to you, it's something that comes through in our services and our inquiries line. And actually in some of our services where we're supporting asylum and refugee women, similarly, like they don't know what they're entitled to, they don't know what their rights are, they don't know where and how to access. So there's a lot of signposting that goes on through those projects. But also on our website, we have some information about, how and where to choose where you're going to give birth, what care options do you have available to you, and those are consistently some of the biggest visited pages on the site. So it just goes to show that these are questions that people have, every woman and pregnant person has and needs answers to.
And it's crazy, it's so fundamental and it's so vital and important that people know how to access maternity services. But we've got all that information on our website now too. About 6 months ago, it all went up there: birth rights, how to access maternity care, rights for migrants, because these are things that people want to know, but it takes us charities to be doing that. But I just say to Trust, use us. We've done the work, we've got the resources there. So please use them at your disposal, because that's what they're there for at the end of the day. So now this
I think
report.
it's really,
Go on.
sorry, I was just going to say, I
No,
think
go
it's
on.
also really interesting. Like, I heard a story from a parent recently, who was planning a home birth, and she said that the only way that she could find out whether or not her home birth service was open and available was going onto their the hospital's social media platforms. You just think, like, that can't be the right way of sharing information with parents. Like, I mean, yes, it's one channel, it's important, but I think we can do better than that.
Yeah, absolutely. And some hospitals, I've seen it, they are getting so much better. They're updating their website, and they're putting
Yeah.
more information on, and they're putting phone numbers on, because again, when you're given so many different numbers, so if you're this week's pregnant, then you ring this number, and if you're this many weeks pregnant, you ring that number, and it is very confusing. So they have tried to improve that, but yeah, other trusts have definitely got that on their to-do list, because you go onto their website and there's just no information whatsoever. And I appreciate it's hard to keep that up to date, but we use a lot of QR codes on our wellbeing wallets, and then we can update certain pages like that on their behalf. And then it's just a question of, it doesn't have to be something that's constantly printed all the time. It's in real time when it's digital. So yeah, again, it just comes down to communication, doesn't it? And improving the communication to families. What I was going to ask you is, now that this report is out there, it's readily available for people to see, you've got your recommendations. What are the next steps? What is NCT going to do next?
So I think our focus at the moment is around the national maternity investigation. There's currently a public call for evidence. So we are going to be using the findings from this report to submit into that. We've also been running some sessions across our internal audiences, so listening to our practitioners, our volunteers. We want to make sure that we're capturing all of those views and experiences within that submission. So yeah, that's a kind of big focus for us, is just making sure that women and pregnant people's experiences are really heard front and center. And I think the investigation has really led with that in their, listening to parents. And that's really welcomed, but we've got to make sure that the full breadth and depth of experiences are heard through this investigation, especially those who are often overlooked and not listened to. So that's the big focus for us. And then we're also going to be looking to take the findings and recommendations out to MPs. So meeting with APPG for maternity chair, and looking to just build some momentum around the recommendations. There's a lot in there.
A lot of work to be done. Yes, I'm feeling it too. But I just feel at the moment there's real momentum, and people are really getting involved. They're getting engaged. There's a lot of opportunity for everyone to have their voice heard, because when the inquiry was first launched, it felt as if our hands were tied, and a lot of people were frustrated, because they're thinking, well, how do I feed into this? Whereas now it seems to be really opening up, and there's lots of MP engagement, which is fantastic. I'm meeting with my local MP tomorrow, actually, to try and gain his support and get him involved. But yeah, this is something that's obviously going to be ongoing for quite some time. It's not going to be wound up anytime soon. But we've all got to do our bit. I feel like we're all responsible. We can all get involved, and we can all help in our own little way, But yeah, this is the time when I've seen so many parents' voices included, which is just absolutely fantastic.
I think you're right, and I think what has been really fantastic about where the process where we are now is that there has been such deep collaborative working across the maternity space, charities, independent midwives, organizations of big and small, who are of a small group of founders, or kind of grassroots organizations to massive national organizations. And there's such a shared consensus that change has got to happen. And also, I think shared consensus largely around what those recommendations and how we're going to create that change. So that feels really positive to me. And I think if the maternity investigation can just listen to that community and that upswell of voice, then, hopefully we'll be on our way to making sure that the government puts this on top of its priority list as an area for investment and change. That's my hope.
It's power in numbers, isn't
Power
it?
in
When we
numbers.
all come together, it's very impactful, and we can't be ignored at the end of the day. It becomes harder.
So. Yeah.
Exactly. So that sounds great. It sounds like NCT are going to be really, really busy with the lobbying and campaigning. And I'm just thinking, if people want to read your full report, where can they access it? Because it sounds like it's really, really interesting.
Yes, so you can head over to our website, nct.org.uk, and then it's, I need to now find my link. I should have done this before we jumped on the call. It is /becoming parent report. So it's nct.org.uk /about us, and then becoming a parent. So you will find it there.
Fantastic. And I guess if anyone's got any questions, they can get in touch with NCT directly, and obviously follow you on socials, because I'm sure there'll be lots of updates about the work that you're doing on there.
Yeah, absolutely. There's always lots going on the socials, and we're doing quite a lot of like parent-led story testimonials as well. So there'll be a lot going on to sort of build and amplify some of the messages that we've got in the report.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you for your time,
Heidi.
Thank you for all the work that NCT is doing. We love partnering with you. We love working with you, because, like you say, power of collaboration is got such a meaningful impact. So, yeah, keep up the good work.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me on.
If you enjoyed listening to this episode, share it with a friend or colleague. Make sure you follow us so you don't miss out on our next episode. If you'd like to support our work by fundraising or volunteering, please email contact@memoracademy.org.uk. For more information on pregnancy and maternity services, please visit our website at www.memoracademy.org.uk. We're also on all of your favourite social media channels. See you next time!